All champions failed the Dragon King's challenge, until a human stable hand got him to laugh. Before we jump into this tale, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me which city or country you're tuning in from. It lets the platform know you're enjoying these stories and really helps the channel grow. Steam curled up from the packed dirt courtyard as the new sun dried last night's rain. The morning smelled of damp straw, saddle soap, and old leather, the familiar perfume of Logan Hayes' world for the last 5 years. In the deep shadow of Dragonspire Fortress, a human stable hand was about to change the destiny of 7 realms. High above the stables, in the ceremonial hall carved from dark stone and lit by towering stained glass windows, the Dragon King Valdrath was distinctly unimpressed. The copper-scaled monarch lounged on an obsidian throne that dwarfed even his massive frame. Seated, he still rose nearly 15 feet, a mountain of ancient muscle and armor-like scales that caught the colored light in metallic flashes. His slit-pupiled amber eyes regarded the warrior in front of him with the weary disdain of someone who had seen far too much of everything. "You dare call that a display of worth?" Valdrath's voice rolled through the hall like distant thunder, each word punctuated by small wisps of smoke curling from his nostrils. "I've watched half-grown hatchlings show more originality." The warrior, an elven bladesinger from the silver forests of Illyria, bowed, cheeks flushed with shame. Moments earlier, he had put on a breathtaking performance, spinning arcs of enchanted steel, whirling leaps, and graceful lunges that would have drawn gasps in any mortal court. Here, earned only boredom. "Great Valdrath," the elf champion protested, "I have devoted 3 decades to perfecting these forms." "And still," the dragon rumbled, claws tapping irritably on the throne's armrest, "you failed to grasp the simplest part of my challenge." The elf bowed himself out of the central circle and took his place among the defeated. A dwarf war captain leaning on a warhammer as big as his torso, a centaur archer staring at the floor, an orc war leader grinding her tusks, and champions from every corner of the 7 realms. For a month, Dragonspire had been flooded with heroes, spellcasters, and living legends answering a single summons. The Dragon King was searching for a new royal guardian. The last guardian, a minotaur champion whose name was whispered with awe, had fallen in a desperate battle against a fanatical order of dragon slayers. Valdrath needed a replacement, and his method of selection had left everyone baffled. Each candidate had been told only, "Show me something that proves you are fit to guard me and my domains." Every warrior assumed it meant strength. Every mage assumed it meant power. Every champion assumed it meant dominance. And every one of them had failed. Is there truly no one left? Valdrath roared, smoke billowing from his jaws. No champion who can pass a test so simple. A ripple of discomfort passed through the assembled courtiers, a mix of dragons and humanoid guys and dignitaries from every realm. To them, nothing about this trial felt simple. Mighty beings had shattered stone with their blows, melted steel with spells, and displayed terrifying skill. Yet the Dragon King remained as unmoved as carved rock. In the prickling silence, a side door opened with a humble creak. A young human stepped through, balancing a wooden bucket brimming with water. He wore the plain brown tunic and trousers of a stable worker. Bits of straw clung to his sandy hair. Logan Hayes had spent 5 years caring for the mounts of visiting nobles. Griffins with bad tempers, spectral steeds, scaled lizards big enough to swallow a cow. He hadn't meant to wander into the middle of the royal trial. Someone had simply told him the Great Hall's water pitchers needed refilling. He took 3 steps, realized exactly where he was, and froze. His gaze swept from the rows of defeated champions to the towering dragon on the throne. His fingers spasmed, and the bucket tilted, sloshing water across the polished floor. Sorry, Your Majesty," he stammered, dropping into an awkward half-bow. "I was just, the pitchers, they said to, I didn't know the trials were still." "You." Valdrath's enormous head turned, amber eyes narrowing on the boy. "You tend my stables, do you not?" Logan swallowed hard. "Why, yes, your magnificence. 5 years now. And your name?" "Logan Hayes, your magnificence." For a long, tense heartbeat, the Dragon King studied him. Smoke drifted lazily from his nostrils. Then, to everyone's astonishment, an odd, rumbling sound echoed through the hall. Laughter. Remarkable timing. Logan Hayes, Valdrath chuckled. Perhaps you would like to attempt my challenge. The hall erupted in whispers. A stable hand. Offered the same chance as the finest champions of 7 realms? The Orc war leader snorted openly. A few of the defeated heroes looked personally insulted. And me? Logan squeaked. I'm not a warrior or mage. I clean stalls and carry water. That's about it. Nevertheless, the Dragon King said, leaning forward with sudden, sharp interest, I invite you to try. Show me something worthy of a guardian. And just like that, the boy with straw in his hair found himself standing in the center of the great hall, bucket still in hand, under the full scrutiny of an ancient dragon and a hall full of legends, with absolutely no plan. Logan's mind raced. What could he possibly show that the others hadn't? He had no legendary weapons, no complicated spells, no impressive titles. Only 5 years' experience avoiding angry hooves and calming mystical beasts. Then he remembered something small and ridiculous that had happened that very morning. Well, Your Magnificence, he began, voice shaky at first. I don't have much to show, but something did happen today with one of the guest mounts. The big griffin from the Northern Territories? The one who hates everyone except his rider. The Dragon King's expression remained unreadable, but he didn't interrupt, which was more patience than he had shown most champions. So Logan kept going. I was cleaning the stall next to his, and I noticed he'd gotten a bramble jammed right where his wing joins his shoulder. Must have been driving him crazy. He kept twisting around, trying to reach it, but he just couldn't quite get there. Logan twisted his own body into an exaggerated pose to demonstrate. Arms cranked backward, shoulders straining, miming a giant bird trying to bite its own wing. It looked more like an overgrown cat chasing its tail than anything heroic. So there's this grand griffin, pride of the North, looking like a barn cat in a bad mood. He's furious and flailing, and I know better than to walk straight up to him. One swipe of those claws, and I'm 2 separate pieces. But I also couldn't just leave him like that. He noticed Valdrath shift on the throne, but the dragon's eyes still held a spark of curiosity. My mother used to distract our old farm dog when she had to pull burrs out of his paws, Logan continued. So I borrowed her trick. I grabbed some meat from the feed store and tossed little pieces just outside his reach. He'd stretch to grab one, and I'd throw the next piece a bit farther. While he was busy playing hunt the snack, I slipped around behind him into his blind spot, and when he stretched just right, Logan mimed carefully sliding something free, slow, patient, with exaggerated caution. I plucked the bramble out in one smooth motion. He spun on me so fast I thought that was the end. I actually saw my whole life flash in front of me in about half a second. But instead of shredding me, he stretched his wing, made this surprised little chirp, then nudged me with his beak like, thanks, human, and went right back to gobbling meat like nothing had happened. Logan finished, suddenly very aware of how small his story sounded compared to tales of dragon slaying and storm-calling magic. He braced himself for a snarl, a bored dismissal, anything that would let him slip away with the last of his dignity. Instead, the impossible happened again. Valdrath's shoulders began to shake. A low rumble built in his chest, rose up his throat, and exploded into full, booming laughter that rattled dust from the rafters and made the stained glass hum in their frames. By the first fires, Valdrath roared between laughs. The griffin chirped and nudged you like a pampered house pet. He slapped the side of his throne with one massive clawed hand, cracking the stone. Logan stood there, bucket in hand, more confused than ever. Had he somehow insulted the Dragon King without realizing it? Was he being mocked? Valdrath's laughter finally tapered off. He wiped a single huge tear from the corner of one eye with a towel on. Oh, human, do you know how ridiculous those proud creatures look when they get stuck like that? He said, still chuckling. I haven't seen a griffin that undignified since, well, that's a story for another day. The Dragon King leaned forward, amber eyes sharpening. Tell me, stable hand, Valdrath asked, In 5 years of working among valuables and vulnerable beasts, did you ever once abuse your position? Take out your frustration on an animal? Slip a coin or trinket from an unattended saddlebag? The question hit Logan harder than he expected. He shook his head. No, you magnificence. The animals are just being what they are, even magical ones. They can't help their nature. As for stealing, Logan swallowed. My father always said a person's reputation takes a lifetime to build and one bad choice to wreck. Not worth a handful of coins. Valdrath leaned back, smoke curling from between his teeth in something that looked suspiciously like a smile. 5 years of steady, unseen service, he said. 5 years working with creatures that could tear you in half by reflex, learning their moods and needs. 5 years of solving problems with patience instead of cruelty. His voice rose, filling the hall. For 30 days, I've watched warriors show me how efficiently they can end life. Mages have demonstrated 100 ways to destroy. Champions have boasted of how thoroughly they can crush opposition. And in all that time, not one has displayed the quality I consider most vital in a guardian. His massive claw pointed straight at Logan. This human, with his simple tale of helping a miserable griffin, has shown more understanding than all your elaborate shows of might. A true guardian knows that raw power without compassion is dangerous. Force without understanding is useless. Skill without judgment is a threat, not a blessing. A stunned hush fell over the crowd. The Orc war leader's jaw hung open. The Bladesinger looked as if he'd been slapped. Great Valdrath, the elf protested at last. You cannot mean to choose a stable worker as royal guardian. He has no formal combat training, no arcane gifts. Those can be taught, the Dragon King cut in. Patience, empathy, ingenuity, far harder to teach. His gaze returned to Logan. So, Logan Hayes, what do you say? Will you accept the role of my royal guardian? Logan stared at him, bucket handle biting into his fingers. I can't fight like they can, he said honestly. I can't cast spells. I don't understand why you'd pick me. But if you truly mean it, I'll try to be worthy. That, Valdrath said with satisfaction, is exactly why you are the right choice. He rose from the throne to his full, towering height. The trial was never about who could hit hardest, he announced. It was about who they truly are underneath. The dragon lowered one huge claw. Step forward and receive your first gift of guardianship. Logan set down the bucket with numb hands and walked forward, legs trembling. The Dragon King's talon, surprisingly gentle for something so deadly, touched his forehead. Heat flared through his skull and poured through his body like molten metal. Images and words crashed through his mind. Maps of distant realms, names of rulers, threads of treaties and grudges and alliances. Protocols, languages, histories, customs, knowledge he had never even guessed existed jammed itself into his thoughts. When a fire passed, Logan staggered but did not fall. The gift of knowledge, Valdrath declared. The first of 3. Names and facts now sat in Logan's mind with crystal clarity. He could identify every banner in the hall. He could list the cities of each realm. He knew exactly how one was supposed to greet a merfolk envoy versus a dwarf prince. Return here at dawn tomorrow, Valdrath said, settling back onto his cracked throne. Your training begins then. The other gifts will come in time. The hall exploded into motion. Arguing champions, agitated courtiers, dragons whispering urgently among themselves. In the middle of the chaos, Logan Hayes stood perfectly still, life forever altered, all because he had once helped a bad-tempered griffin with a thorn in its wing. And his story was only getting started. The night slipped past Logan in ragged pieces of half-sleep and racing thoughts. He had been moved from his cramped loft above the stables to a grand set of rooms inside the main fortress, the former quarters of the Minotaur Guardian. Servants had measured him, fussed over fabrics, and spoken to him with a nervous politeness reserved for very important people who might still track in mud. By morning, he stood before a polished mirror in soft gray training clothes that flowed like water but felt as solid as leather. A silver dragon's head clasp rested at his collar, the symbol of an office he barely understood. His reflection looked like the same broad-shouldered, sandy-haired young man who had mucked stalls a day ago. But there was a new weight in his eyes, a depth that hadn't been there before, the echo of all that borrowed knowledge. A knock sounded. Logan opened the door to find a small, parchment-skinned being with oversized, luminous eyes. His newly crowded mind supplied the answer instantly. Scroll Keeper. Ancient record-keeping race. Dragon allies. Royal guardian. The creature said with a formal bow. I am Pax. I am to escort you to your training. The Dragon King awaits in the Dawn Arena. Logan followed Pax through twisting corridors and down a series of carved stairways until the fortress opened into an enormous open-air amphitheater cut into the mountainside. Stone terraces ringed a wide arena floor covered in pale sand. The rising sun painted everything in gold. Waiting in a loose circle on the arena floor were people he recognized, not from experience, but from the flood of knowledge in his head. Legends of battle, magic, diplomacy, and more. At the center, wings half unfurled, scales gleaming like polished metal in the morning light, stood Valdrath. He was even more overwhelming in the open sky. Come forward, Guardian, Valdrath called. His voice echoed from stone to stone. Logan stepped into the circle's center, acutely aware of the sharp, measuring eyes on him. These are your teachers, Valdrath announced. Masters from across the realms. Each of them will pass on what they can. You will train with them every day. Where others need decades, you will not have that luxury. Logan looked around. A stocky dwarf with a serious expression and a battle-scarred axe. A tall, elegant elf radiating magical power. A striking centaur with about taller than Logan. A dragon in human form dressed in formal robes, gazed like a spear. With respect, your magnificence, Logan said, I don't see how I can learn everything they know in any reasonable amount of time. I'm just human. A deep chuckle rolled out of Valdrath's chest. Exactly, he said. Which brings us to your second gift. The dragon lowered his enormous head until one amber eye was level with Logan's own. Are you ready to receive the blessing of potential? He asked. Logan had no idea what that truly meant, but backing down now felt impossible. I am ready, he said. This will hurt, Valdrath warned calmly, but must be done. Before Logan could reply, the dragon inhaled. Then the world became fire. Valdrath exhaled a concentrated stream of blue-white flame directly over him. It swallowed Logan in an instant. Agony roared through his body. Every bone, muscle, and nerve felt like it was being broken down and hammered into a new shape. He tried to scream, but the sound disappeared in the roar of the dragon fire. His vision flashed white, then black, then splintered into colors he had never seen before. His sense of self stretched, twisted, and threatened to snap. And then the flames vanished. Logan collapsed to his hands and knees, panting in the warm sand. To his shock, his training clothes were untouched. No burns, no smoke. He raised trembling hands to his face. No blistered skin, no charred hair. Yet everything felt different. Stand, Guardian, Valdrath commanded. Logan rose and noticed how light his body felt, how sharply his senses focused. The pain faded faster than it had any right to, replaced by a steady hum of energy. The blessing of potential, Valdrath said, will let you learn faster than your kind is meant to. Your body will adapt with unnatural speed. Your mind will absorb and organize information with near-perfect clarity. What would take most a lifetime, you will learn in weeks. He turned his head toward the masters. You have 1 month, he told them. At the end of that time, he will face the trial of guardianship. Even with Logan's new knowledge, he could sense the shock rippling through the instructors. 1 month? For what he needed to become. It sounded impossible. Begin, Valdrath ordered. With a powerful sweep of his wings, the Dragon King leapt into the sky and was gone. The month that followed erased any illusions Logan had held about what intense training meant. From the first light of dawn until long past sunset, each day blended into a blur of exhaustion and pain. Master Thorn, the dwarven battlemaster, introduced him to weapon after weapon on the practice grounds. Spear, sword and shield, axe, hammer, staff, bow, and strange tools of war whose names he could barely pronounce. Logan's hands blistered, split, scabbed, and split again. The next day, they had already begun to heal, only to be torn open once more. "Faster, boy," Thorn would bark. "My great-grandmother's bones could move quicker than that, and she's been dust for centuries." Lady Elindra, an elven archmage whose mere presence crackled with restrained power, attacked his inexperience in magic with equal ferocity. She made him sit cross-legged for hours, feeling the flows of energy in the world, forcing him to distinguish one stream from another and draw them into precise patterns. "Focus," she snapped whenever his mind drifted. "Control is the only thing between you and being ripped apart from the inside. Either you master the current, or it pulls you under." Zephyr, the centaur ranger, took him out of the fortress entirely, into forests, marshes, and rocky hills. Then she would simply leave him. "The land is never silent," she'd say as she walked away. "Listen, and it will talk back. Miss its warnings, and you die." Logan learned to read trail marks, weather signs, broken branches, and tiny disturbances in the ground. He learned to find water, build shelter, and get a fire going in miserable conditions, with Zephyr watching critically whenever he finally stumbled back to Dragonspire. Serafina, the dragon diplomat in human form, never raised a sword against him, but might have been the most terrifying of his teachers. She drilled him in sequences of bows, hand signs, titles, and rituals. "No," she would say crisply whenever he slipped. That gesture would insult a troll chief. That phrase would offend a sea prince. That color combination suggests mourning to the mountain folk. You do not have the luxury of mistakes, Guardian. A single wrong word could cost thousands of lives. Days blurred into one another. Logan fell into bed each night, aching in muscles he hadn't known existed. Every morning he woke up stronger, quicker, and more coordinated than he had been the day before. The pain that would once have broken him became something his changed body simply incorporated, rebuilt, and used. 3 weeks in, Thorn and Logan clashed in the arena at sunrise, as they had nearly every day. This time, something changed. Logan's shield met the dwarf's axe at exactly the right angle. His sword slid into a clever counter. For a moment, Thorn's grip faltered. The dwarf jumped back and held up a hand. "Enough." His chest heaved with effort, but there was a glint of respect in his eyes. "You might be worth the steel we put in your hands after all," he grunted. Later that same day, under Elindra's watchful gaze, Logan managed to catch and safely redirect a burst of wild elemental energy that had once almost overwhelmed him. The elf's lips twitched in the barest hint of a smile. "Acceptable," she said. From her, it felt like high praise. By the end of the 4th week, Logan's reflection showed a man he barely recognized, stronger, faster, carrying himself with a quiet awareness of his own body. His mind held languages, histories, and rituals in neat, accessible order. And while he had not become a master in any single discipline, he had become dangerously competent in many. On the 30th morning, Pax appeared at his door again. "The Dragon King summons you," the scroll keeper said. Logan followed him back to the great hall, breathing slowly to calm his pounding heart. Valdrath waited on his obsidian throne, immense and still. Before him stood Thorn, Elindra, Zephyr, and Serafina, silent, serious, and watching. "Your Magnificence," Logan said, bowing, "the month is over. I've trained as you commanded." Valdrath's gaze swept over him. "So you have," the dragon replied. "Your mentors speak well of your progress." Rare words, coming from such harsh judges. Logan blinked. The respect had never shown on any of their faces. "The time has come for the test of guardianship," Valdrath continued. "Tradition would pit you against your predecessor in a formal duel. But as my guardian spot is empty, we must do this another way." He raised one claw, and the air before the throne shimmered. A swirling portal of light and shadow unfurled, pulsing gently like a living thing. "Through this gate," Valdrath said, "waits your trial. You will face challenges born from your own thoughts, your deepest fears, your softest spots, your hidden doubts. How you deal with them will decide if you're truly fit to be my guardian. Logan stared at the portal. May I take weapons? He asked quietly. Bring what you think you will need, Valdrath said. But remember, not all threats can be struck down with steel or burned away with a spell. After a moment's thought, Logan chose a simple, balanced sword and a small pouch of practical supplies. Fire-starting tools, cord, a knife, and a few basic items Zephyr had taught him never to travel without. Somehow, marching into the unknown with a cart full of magical artifacts felt wrong. I'm ready, he said. One more thing, Valdrath added. If you succeed, you will receive the final gift of guardianship, the lengthening of your years. No mortal can serve in this role for the span it requires otherwise. The post demands centuries, not a handful of decades. The idea struck Logan like a stone dropped into deep water. Centuries. Watching everyone he loved grow old while he did not. Seeing kingdoms rise and fall. He swallowed. I understand, he said, though he knew he didn't, not really. May your choices be wise, Valdrath said. There was something almost like blessing in his voice. Logan drew a steadying breath, gripped his sword, and stepped into the portal. Light swallowed him. Falling. Floating. Neither. Colors melted into each other, then evaporated. Sounds came and went like echoes from another dimension. Then, suddenly, everything snapped into focus. Logan stood on packed earth in front of a small farmhouse with a thatched roof and familiar lean-to shed. Wheat fields rippled golden around him. The air smelled of dust, sunlight, and memories. Home. He knew this place. The Hayes family farm near the village of Brook. It looked exactly as it had before he'd left for Dragonspire, and yet wrong at the same time. The sky was the color of dry blood, too still and heavy. No birds sang. No insects buzzed in the fields. The world seemed muffled. Hello. Logan called. Is anyone here? Logan? Is it you? The voice hit him like a physical blow. He hadn't heard it in years, but he would have known it anywhere. Mother. A woman stepped out of the farmhouse. Elizabeth Hayes looked just as he remembered her. Lines around her eyes from squinting at fields in bright sun, hands roughened by years of work, but her expression as warm as ever, until she saw him. Then her whole face lit up. Oh, Logan, you're finally home, she cried, arms opening wide. Every part of him wanted to run to her, hug her, smell her hair, hear her fuss about his weight and clothes like she always had. But another part, sharpened by Seraphina's lessons and everything he'd already endured, whispered, this is a trial. None of this is real. He didn't draw his sword, but he didn't move toward her either. You're not really my mother, he said carefully. You look like her. You sound like her. But this is part of the test. Her expression crumpled from joy to hurt. How can you say that? She demanded. Of course I'm your mother. Do you really not recognize me? I recognize what you're imitating, Logan said. But I walked through a portal created by Valdrath. That sky isn't ours. This farm isn't truly here. So I don't believe you are either. Her face twisted, the hurt turning bitter. Is this how you treat your family now? She snapped. We broke ourselves to raise you, and you ran off to clean up after dragons. Do you know what has happened since you left? Your father's back gave out last winter. He can barely stand. The farm is failing. We needed you, and you weren't here. Every word struck a place inside Logan he'd avoided looking at. This had always been the fear pushed to the back of his mind, that by going to Dragonspire, he had abandoned them. He shook his head. That's not true, he said, but his voice wavered. I sent money home. I can earn more here than I ever could working the fields. Father's letters say the extra coin helps, that they hired hands. Lies, she spat. Small lies to make you feel better while we collapse. We're nearly ruined, Logan. Soon we'll lose everything. And now you've bound yourself to that dragon, planning to serve for centuries while your real family is left behind to rot. He felt his hand slip from his sword hilt. What good was a blade against this? The words sank deep, tangling with guilt he'd carried quietly for years. I'm sorry, he whispered. He wasn't even sure if he was apologizing to the apparition in front of him or to his real parents back in the true Brook. Her expression softened just enough to slide something else into his chest. You can still fix this, she said, voice turning coaxing. Refuse the dragon's last gift. Leave this guardianship nonsense behind. Come home. Help us. Your family needs you more than some ancient monster ever will. He'll tire of you eventually and toss you aside. We never would. For a heartbeat, the offer tempted him. He pictured simple days on the farm again, his father's tired smile, his mother's stew on a cold night, neighbors he knew, and chores that made sense. No endless years, no impossible burden. What if that's better? A small voice asked. What if you're running away again by saying yes to Valdrath? Another memory rose up, arriving right when he needed it. Seraphina's cool voice during one of their lessons. The most convincing lies are built from truth, she had said. Look closely. Ask yourself which parts are fact and which are twisted to push you towards something. Logan took a slow breath. What parts were true? He had left the farm. His parents had faced hard work without him. He would outlive them if he accepted the long years ahead. But it was also true that his wages had made a difference. He remembered the real letters. His father's clumsy handwriting describing repairs they finally managed to pay for. His mother's notes thanking him, telling him never to feel guilty for taking the Dragonspire job. And, as guardian, he would have more power to help them, not less. The lie here was pretending he had only two choices: abandon his family or abandon his calling. No, Logan said, straightening. That's not the full picture. The not quite Elizabeth froze. I can serve as guardian and care for my family, he said firmly. With that authority, I can guarantee they have land, coin, and protection. I can visit them, write to them, make sure they're never alone. The choice you're offering, guardianship or family, is fake. Her eyes flashed with anger, and her face began to ripple like disturbed water. Foolish boy, she hissed. Do you really think that dragon cares about your tiny human worries? You're a tool. When you break, he'll simply find another. Maybe he will, Logan said. Maybe one day I'll fail. But if I can use this time to protect more people, including my parents, then it's a risk I'm willing to accept. That's part of the job. And they didn't raise me to run from responsibility just because it hurts. With a sound like tearing cloth, the illusion fell apart. The false farm, the crimson sky, and the woman wearing his mother's face all dissolved into mist and vanished. The world around him faded back into a formless gray. Well done, a disembodied voice said from nowhere and everywhere. You have faced your fear of failing those you love. The void shifted again, reshaping itself. Sand rose beneath his feet. Air turned heavy with smoke and iron. When the scene cleared, Logan stood in the middle of a battlefield. The battlefield was chaos frozen in a single moment stretched long. Shouts, the clash of steel, the crack of magic, everything blended into a roar. All around him, armored figures struggled against each other. The sky above was dark with arrows and streaks of raw spell light. And coming straight toward him, warhammer already raised, was a towering shape Logan recognized from Dragonspire's histories. The Minotaur Guardian. He was enormous, easily 8 feet tall, with the muscular body of a veteran fighter and the horned head of a bull. Heavy armor bearing Valdrath's emblem wrapped his torso and shoulders. Scars crisscrossed his exposed fur and skin. His name surfaced from Logan's mind, Styrion, royal guardian for 300 years. Fell defending refugees from the Dragon Slayer cult. You believe you can take my place, human? Styrion bellowed over the din. You dare assume yourself worthy to stand where I fell. Logan barely raised his sword in time. The Minotaur's hammer came down with the force of a falling boulder. Logan threw himself aside. The hammer smashed into the ground where he had just been, sending up a spray of dirt and cracked stone. He retreated, mind racing. I don't claim to match you, Logan shouted back. You were a legend. I'm barely past apprentice. Then you are not worthy, the Minotaur roared, spinning his hammer in a brutal arc. Guardianship is earned in blood and battle, not in stories about griffins and gentle hearts. Logan ducked under the next swing. This was hopeless. Even with all his training and enhanced reflexes, he could tell, in a straight fight, he wouldn't last long. Styrion had centuries of experience and raw, overwhelming strength. His brain latched onto something Valdrath had said before the portal. The greatest dangers you face cannot be beaten by steel or magic alone. This wasn't about proving he was the better fighter. It was a test of something else. The next time Styrion charged, Logan made a choice. He dropped his sword. The blade hit the dirt at his feet. The Minotaur skidded to a stop mid-charge, eyes flaring with confusion and anger. "What trick is this?" he growled. "I know who you are," Logan said, breathing hard but keeping his voice steady. "You're Styrion, guardian of the Dragon King for 3 centuries. You died facing the Dragon Slayer cult, not to protect Valdrath himself, but to cover the escape of a group of refugees they were hunting." Styrion snorted. "Any scribe can recite that much," he snapped. "True," Logan admitted, "but there's something the official histories don't mention." He met the Minotaur's eyes. "The little girl who gave you a crown of wildflowers that morning," he said quietly. "She came running up to you when you stood watch at the village edge. No fear at all. You let her place the flowers on your head instead of brushing her away. And later, when the cult arrived, you thought of that child as you chose where you would stand and what you would risk." Styrion froze. The battlefield around them dimmed, the noise dropping as if someone had turned down the world. "How do you know that?" the Minotaur asked, voice lower now. "I don't," Logan answered honestly. "I'm guessing. But it fits. A guardian doesn't choose death because of duty alone. You chose to protect something innocent, knowing what it might cost. That's what makes you who you are." The Minotaur's grip loosened on the hammer. "You will face your own moments like that," he warned. "Times where you must decide what, and who, you're willing to give up." "I know," Logan said quietly, "and I can't promise I'll always choose perfectly. But I can promise I'll try to live up to the example you set. I'll think of real people, not just titles and treaties, when I make those decisions." For a long moment, Styrion studied him. "You understand sacrifice," the Minotaur said at last. There was a hint of reluctant approval in his tone, perhaps more than I expected. He stepped back. The hammer vanished. The battlefield blurred, the fighting figures and smoke dissolving like mist under the morning sun. Once again, Logan floated in the gray void. "You have met the weight of sacrifice and recognized its true shape," the unseen voice said. "One test remains, the hardest of all." The gray peeled away a third time. When it settled, Logan found himself back in the great hall of Dragonspire. Valdrath sat on his obsidian throne. Thorn, Elindra, Zephyr, and Seraphina stood in their usual places. The stained glass windows cast familiar colors across the floor. Everything looked exactly right. "Welcome back," Guardian Valdrath said. "Your trials are complete. You have passed." "Already?" Logan asked, frowning. "I thought there were 3 challenges." "There were," the Dragon King replied smoothly. "You endured them. You have proven yourself. Come forward and receive your last gift." Some instinct raised its head in Logan's mind. He scanned the hall slowly. The throne, the windows, the instructors. He felt something wasn't quite right. A tiny piece didn't fit. Then he saw it. Seraphina, Dragon Envoy, Master of Protocol, stood among the teachers. In the real world, she had a small scar at the corner of her left eye. A thin white line she'd once explained came from a youthful argument with a clutch sibling. Logan's enhanced memory recalled it in perfect detail. The Seraphina in front of him had no scar. "You're not Valdrath," Logan said, taking a step back. The dragon on the throne tilted his head slowly. "Do not be foolish," he said. "You completed the test. Come claim your reward." "This is still part of it," Logan said. "The last trial. This hall isn't real." For a split second, the edges of the room flickered like a candle in a draft. The fake Valdrath's eyes narrowed. "You risk more than you know by refusing me," the dragon said. "I offer you years beyond counting. You could watch ages turn, walk alongside legends, outlast empires. One breath away, if you'll just take my gift." "But you're not him," Logan replied. "And whatever you're offering isn't the real gift of long life. I don't know who or what you are, but you're not the Dragon King." The figure on the throne changed. Copper scales darkened, becoming a deep, absorbing black. The horns twisted, The shape wavered and stretched until it was neither dragon nor anything Logan recognized, more shadow than substance, with eyes that glowed like embers. "I can give you far more than Valdrath ever will," it hissed. The voice was no longer Valdrath's rumble. Higher, sharper, tempting. Power, wealth, adoration. No more stable muck. No more bowing and scraping. You could rule, not obey. Why settle for being a guard dog when you could sit on the throne? Logan thought about that for a moment. Not because he found the offer attractive, but because he wanted to fully see what was being tested. "This is temptation," he said simply. "The lure of power for its own sake. That's the real trial, isn't it?" The shadow's lipless mouth curled. "Everyone wants power," it said. "Some are simply honest enough to admit it. With my gifts, you could bend the realms to your will. Why waste yourself protecting those too weak to protect themselves?" "Because power without a purpose is empty," Logan answered. "And a purpose built only around yourself is a trap. Being guardian is about doing something for others, not about making the world kneel to me." The shadow laughed, a sound like dry leaves and broken glass. "Naive," it taunted. "The strong rule. The weak are ruled. That is how things are. Valdrath protects only because it suits his vanity. You could do the same, only more cleverly." "Then that's the difference between your world and his," Logan said calmly. "And between your world and mine." He met the glowing eyes without flinching. "Valdrath chose me because I understand that real strength doesn't come from fear, but from compassion and understanding. From choosing to protect when it would be easier to dominate. You represent the opposite of that. So no, whatever you're offering, I reject it." The shadow creature let out a furious shriek and leapt at him, claws of darkness stretching out. Logan didn't run. He didn't raise his sword. He simply stood where he was. The claws swept through him as though he were a projection of light. The creature staggered, startled. "You have no claim on me," Logan said, turning to face it. "I'm not interested in the kind of power you sell." The shadow began to collapse, as if pulled inward by invisible hands. Its edges shredded into rising wisps of darkness. With one final, angry wail, it imploded and vanished. The fake hall vanished with it. Gray surrounded him one more time. "You have faced fear," the unseen voice intoned. "You have understood sacrifice. You have rejected the empty promise of power. The test is complete." Light poured through the void, bright enough to erase everything. For a moment, Logan felt weightless, unanchored. Then he broke through the brightness like someone surfacing from deep water. He was back, in the real hall, in front of the real dragon. Valdrath sat on his cracked obsidian throne. Thorn, Elindra, Zephyr, and Seraphina stood in their places. This time, Seraphina's familiar eye scar exactly where it belonged. "Welcome back, Guardian," Valdrath said. And this time, there was no doubt. "Thank you, Your Magnificence," Logan said, bowing with genuine respect. I finally understand what this role truly means." "Do you?" the Dragon King asked. "Say it in your own words." Logan took a breath. "Being your guardian doesn't just mean guarding you," he said. "It means protecting everyone who lives under your rule. It means making hard choices for the sake of the greater good. It means remembering that strength without empathy is dangerous, and that the point of power is to serve something bigger than yourself, not to put yourself above everyone else." A low, approving rumble came from Valdrath's chest. Not quite laughter, but close. "Well answered," he said. "Logan Hayes, are you prepared to receive your final gift and fully take up your duties?" Logan's mind flicked back to his parents in Hebruk, the weight of centuries ahead, the responsibilities he'd just accepted. He also saw the good he might do, preventing wars, protecting villages, making sure people like that little flower-crowned girl in Styrian story stayed safe. "I am ready," he said. Valdrath rose from the throne and walked forward until his massive head lowered to Logan's level. "The stretching of your years is not given lightly," the dragon said, voice softer than Logan had ever heard. "Your human life would have been brief. With this gift, you will see generations pass while you remain. You will watch friends and family grow old and leave this world. Are you willing to carry that? Logan held his gaze. I can't know exactly how that will feel until it happens, he answered. But I believe that the extra years can bring wisdom, and that I can use that wisdom to help more people. If you grant me this gift, I'll spend those years in service to the realms. Valdrath inclined his head. So be it. He opened his mouth, but no fire came. Instead, a gentle golden mist poured out, wrapping around Logan like warm sunlight. It soaked into his skin, into his bones, into something deeper that had no name. There was no pain this time, only a feeling of widening, as if his future had suddenly stretched far past the horizon he was used to seeing. When the light faded, he looked exactly the same. No glowing eyes, no sudden height, no new scars. Yet somewhere beneath the surface, he knew, in that quiet place where the dragon's earlier gifts had settled, that his life now reached much farther than it once had. It is done, Valdrath said. Rise, Logan Hayes, royal guardian of the Seven Realms. Logan stood. All across the hall, courtiers and teachers dropped to one knee. Even Master Thorn, who had once mocked the idea of a stable boy becoming anything important, bowed his head in acknowledgement. There will be a formal ceremony tomorrow, Valdrath went on. Titles, banners, speeches. But your work starts now. Are you ready to hear your first assignment? Logan squared his shoulders. I am, your magnificence. Good, Valdrath said. Because a situation is brewing in the southern marches that needs exactly what you are. Someone who can talk before he swings a sword, but who is not afraid to draw one if he must. He explained. Tension had been building between the merfolk of the Coral Sovereignty and the human fishing community of Port Haven. Disputes over waters, nets, and ancient agreements had nearly escalated into violent clashes. One careless move on either side could spill into a wider conflict. As Valdrath spoke, Logan's first gift, knowledge, sorted the information swiftly. He remembered every detail he'd studied about merfolk codes of honor, their views on territory and insult, and a long history between Port Haven and the underwater city nearby. He recalled which words opened a conversation and which started a war. His second gift, the accelerated growth Valdrath had burned into his body, reminded him of drills with Thorn, escapes through wilderness with Zephyr, and delicate diplomatic games with Seraphina. He knew he could fight if he had to. He knew he would be able to survive sudden trouble. He knew how to recognize which gestures would soothe a bruised pride and which would inflame it. And somewhere beneath all that training sat something even older, the part of him that had once quietly helped a miserable griffin out of a painful situation instead of walking away. I'll leave for the southern marches at first light, Logan said when Valdrath finished. Already his mind was sketching routes, supplies, and the faces of people he might need to speak to first. I chose well, Valdrath murmured, almost to himself. Then, more loudly, the royal guardian has spoken. It will be so. As the hall began to stir with new activity, messengers racing off with orders, scribes rushing to prepare documents, Logan paused. He thought of the boy he had been a month earlier, tired, smelling like horses, worrying about his parents, and dreaming of seeing the world. He thought of the man he was now, bearing the Dragon King's crest, carrying magic in his bones and centuries in his future, tasked with protecting 7 realms. And yet, deep down, something important hadn't changed at all. He was still the same person who saw a creature in pain and thought, how can I fix this without hurting it more? He was still the boy whose first instinct was to solve problems with patience and creativity instead of brute force. That, more than any talent or training, had made the Dragon King laugh. That, more than any display of strength, had made Valdrath choose him. It wasn't his sword skills, his spells, or his rank that set him apart, but the understanding that some of the strongest tools in the world were kindness, insight, and, when the moment was right, a well-timed joke. Logan left the great hall with the weight of his new responsibilities resting on his shoulders, but his steps steady. Behind him, dragons and dignitaries argued and planned. Ahead of him lay oceans, cities, and conflicts he couldn't yet imagine. His legend was only beginning. Stories would one day be told of Logan Hayes, the former stable boy who became a guardian, walked with dragons, and secured peace across the realms. Songs would remember his battles, his judgments, and the impossible choices he'd face over centuries. But those who knew the truth would always remember where it started. With a stable hand, a grumpy griffin, and the first time anyone had ever passed the Dragon King's test, by making him laugh. And that's where our story ends for today. If you stayed with me all the way through, take a second to drop your thoughts in the comments. What did you like? What would you change? And which part of Logan's journey hit you hardest? Your feedback, good or bad, helps shape future stories. Tap the like button if you enjoyed this tale, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. I'll leave another story on screen that I think you'll really enjoy.